Hello friend, Modi Promise is my name. Welcome to biology class. The theme of the lesson for today is organism and its environment. And our topic is relevance of biology to agriculture part 7. In this lesson, we will be looking at food preservation and storage. Let us take our learning objectives as we begin the lesson. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to explain food preservation. Also, you should be able to describe food storage. And finally, you should be able to describe the different methods of preserving foodstuffs. In the past, several methods have been used to keep agricultural products used as food in good condition. Food kept with any of these methods relatively retain qualities such as color, texture, flavor, and nutritive values in food until the time when consumed or sold. Today, other methods of food preservation have been adopted, even though the old methods are effective and still in use. All these methods, the old and new methods, prevent food spoilage and make food edible even when kept for a longer time. They are referred to as food preservation methods. First of all, what is food preservation? Let us move on as we look at the meaning of food preservation. Food preservation is any method used in slowing or preventing food spoilage. When we talk about spoilage, we mean that any change in food that makes it unfit for consumption. It could occur as a result of any of the following factors. One is chemical changes in food. An example is oxidation of enzymes. There are enzymes in the tissues of wide variety of agricultural products. These enzymes, when exposed to atmospheric oxygen, undergo a chemical reaction called oxidation. A good example is sliced apple fruit. And this is a typical image of sliced apple fruit. It contains an enzyme known as polyphenol oxidase. When polyphenol oxidase is exposed to the atmosphere, it reacts and undergo oxidation, changing to another compound known as melanin. Melanin is the pigment that causes this brown coloration in this part of the apple as seen from the image. Another factor that can cause food spoilage is microorganism contamination and growth. Example is fungi. Microorganisms, when they contaminate agricultural products, they multiply and produce acids, enzymes, and waste that can cause food spoilage. A typical example is fungi growth on tomato. A typical example can be seen from this image. Here we can see fungi contaminating various parts of the tomato fruit. And the last factor that causes food spoilage we are going to be discussing in this class is increase in temperature. For example, during a sunny day. Increase in temperature favors the growth of microorganisms that contaminate food and also increases the actions of enzymes that cause food spoilage. A spoiled food loses its quality, nutrients, and also have unpleasant smell. However, food that is properly preserved retains its color, texture, flavor, and nutrients and can be stored for a longer time. This brings us to food storage. Food storage is the process of keeping food in a good condition for later use. People who consume such food have fewer chances of contracting foodborne illnesses. There are different methods used to preserve food. Let us look at method of food preservation. Some methods of preserving food are drying, salting, freezing and refrigeration, canning, pasteurization, fermentation, and food irrigation. Let us look at drying. Drying is a method of food preservation where the moisture content of food is removed by evaporation. Reduced moisture content in food prevents the growth of microorganisms that cause food spoilage. Drying can be achieved by any of the following processes. 1. Smoking. 2. Sun drying. 3. Air drying. Now, let us look at these processes of drying. Smoking is a process of drying which is used to preserve food. In this process, food is placed over the smoke of burning materials. Smoking makes it difficult for microorganisms to survive in food. It also enhances the flavor in food. Some food items preserved using this method include fish, meat, etc. Next, we have sun drying. Sun drying is a process of drying whereby food items are placed under the sun. The heat from the sun makes it difficult for microorganisms to survive in food because it removes the moisture content from food. Some examples of food preserved using this method include plums, tomato, chili pepper, apple, etc. This is a typical image of a man using the method of smoking to preserve fishes, which we can see over here. Also, from this image, we can see a man using the process of sun drying to preserve some of its farm products. Air drying is a process of drying whereby food is exposed to continuous flow of air. Moisture evaporates more during the continuous movement of air over food items. An example of food preserved using this method is pepper. Today, other advanced techniques have been used for drying food items. They include vacuum drying, freeze drying, oven drying, etc. This is a typical image of a freeze dryer, and also this is a typical image of an oven dryer. The next method of food preservation, which we are going to be looking at, is salting. Salting is a method of food preservation where salt is applied on food materials. The salt kills microorganisms in food and also remove the moisture content. Examples of food preserved using this method are fish, meat, etc. Moving on, we are going to look at another method of food preservation, which is freezing and refrigeration. Freezing and refrigeration is a method of food preservation where the temperature of food items is reduced or lowered. Reduced temperature slows the growth of microorganisms that cause spoilage in food and also reduces the activities of enzymes. Some examples of food preserved using this method are vegetables, milk, meat, fish, fruits, etc. This is a typical image of refrigeration used in preserving food items. The next method of food preservation we'll be looking at is canning. Canning is a method of food preservation whereby food items are processed and sealed in an airtight container. The container is then heated in a water bath or a pressure canner to kill microorganisms before it is allowed to cool. Some examples of food preserved using this method include meat, vegetables, fruits, etc. This is a typical image of cucumber which is preserved using the canning method. We can see cucumber in the jar. Also, this is a typical image of canned items. We can see them here. Food are preserved inside, and this is a pressure canner. Next, let us look at pasteurization, which is another method of food preservation. Pasteurization is a process whereby food items are exposed to heat for a short period of time to kill microorganisms. A good example of food preserved using this method is milk. Milk is heated below 100 degrees Celsius for a short period of time to kill microorganisms before it is allowed to cool. This is a typical image of a pasteurizer. The next method of food preservation we are going to be looking at is fermentation. Fermentation is a process carried out by microorganisms such as yeast and lactic acid bacteria. In the absence of oxygen, these organisms convert carbohydrates into byproducts such as carbon dioxide, energy, and alcohol, which is known as ethanol or organic acids. The organic acids from fermentation can be used as preservatives of food. And finally, for this class, we are going to be looking at food irrigation, which is a method of food preservation. Food irrigation is a method of food preservation where food is exposed to a high energy compound known as ionizing radiation. Ionizing radiation kills microorganisms that cause food spoilage and also kill parasites that can also grow and contaminate food. Irradiation helps to 1. Extend the shelf life of food, that is preserving the food. 2. Sterilize the food. 3. Prevent foodborne illnesses. Some examples of food preserved using this method are pork, beef, vegetable, etc. This is a typical image showing us rays that can be used for irradiation. As we can see from this image here, gamma ray and X-ray are the two types of rays that can be used to irradiate food. Having said all these, we have come to the end of today's lesson. But before we go, let us take a look at what we have learned in a summary. In summary, we learned that food preservation is the act of slowing or preventing food spoilage. We also learned that food preserved properly allows for longer storage. Next, we learned that food storage is the process of keeping food in good condition for later use. And finally, we learned that drying, salting, freezing and refrigeration, canning, pasteurization, fermentation, and irrigation are some methods of preserving food. Now, let us test ourselves to know how well we have learned so far with some questions. Question number 1. Food improperly preserved: A. Retains its nutritive content. B. Is safe for consumption. C. Maintains its flavor. Or D. Undergoes chemical changes. The correct answer is D. Undergoes chemical changes. Question number 2. When food is properly preserved in a refrigerator, A. Its temperature is increased. B. The actions of its enzymes are reduced. C. Microorganisms' growth increases. Or D. Its nutrient is drastically lost. The correct answer is B. The actions of its enzymes are reduced. This will be all for this lesson. I believe you can now define food preservation and storage, and also you can describe some methods of preserving food. Thank you for watching. See you in our next class. Bye-bye for now.